They say electricity won't finish you unless you touch both wires. My wife proved them wrong without me ever leaving the ground. I'm Eddie Parrish, and I used to think I had it all figured out. 39 years old, co-owner of Parrish Electric with my brother John, married to Beth for 16 years, 2 daughters who still laughed at my terrible dad jokes. I should have known something was burning when the house started smelling like ozone and betrayal. The first real shock came on a Tuesday night in October. Beth was making her famous lasagna, the one that usually meant she wanted something expensive. She'd been acting strange for weeks, taking calls in the other room, spending hours at the gym, buying new clothes that never seemed to make it home in shopping bags. "Eddie, we need to talk about your mother," she said, not looking up from the cheese she was grating with more force than necessary. "What about Mom?" I asked, settling into my usual spot at the kitchen counter. Ruth Parrish was 72, sharp as a tack, and owned 60% of Parrish Electric. She'd built the company with my dad before he died, and she wasn't about to let anyone forget it. She's getting older. Maybe it's time she stepped back from the business decisions. Beth's voice had that careful tone she used when she was testing the waters for something big. I laughed, thinking she was joking. "Mom? Step back?" She'd sooner rewire the Pentagon with her eyes closed. Besides, the company's doing great. We just landed the Morrison Mall contract. Beth finally looked at me and something cold flickered in her eyes. "That's exactly the problem, Eddie. You and John are doing all the work, but she's making all the money. It's not fair to our family. Our family. Not my family, not the Parrish family, but our family. Like she was drawing a line in the sand and asking me to choose sides. Beth, Mom earned her stake in that company. She and Dad built it from nothing. And now she's holding you back." Beth slammed the grater down on the counter. "Do you know what Karen's husband just bought her? A brand new BMW cash. Because he knows how to take care of his family. Karen was Beth's best friend, married to a guy who sold insurance and spent every weekend bragging about his latest commission. I'd never liked him, and I was starting to understand why Beth brought him up so often lately. "We're doing fine, Beth. The girls have everything they need. You have your car. My car is 3 years old, Eddie. 3 years. And when was the last time we took a real vacation? Karen and Steve just got back from Aruba." I stared at her, watching her transform into someone I barely recognized. The woman I'd married had been happy with simple things. She'd loved our first apartment, celebrated when we could afford our first house, been proud when the business started turning a real profit. This woman standing in front of me was someone else entirely. "If you're not happy with what we have, maybe we should talk about what's really going on," I said carefully. Beth's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, anger, then something that looked almost like panic before settling into cold determination. "What's really going on is that I'm tired of being married to someone who's satisfied with scraps. John sees it too. He thinks you've gotten too comfortable." That hit me like a live wire to the chest. John was my older brother, my business partner, and supposedly my best friend. We'd worked together for 15 years, built Parrish Electric into one of the most respected electrical contractors in the state. If he was talking to my wife about me behind my back, something was seriously wrong. "John said that? He's worried about you, Eddie." "We both are. You used to have ambition." I felt something shift inside me, like a circuit breaker flipping. The conversation wasn't really about my mother, or the business, or even Karen's BMW. This was about something else entirely, something that had been building for months while I was too busy working to notice. "When did you and John have this conversation?" Beth turned back to the lasagna, but I could see her hands shaking slightly. "We talk sometimes. He cares about his brother." "Where do you talk?" "When?" "Eddie, you're being paranoid." But I wasn't being paranoid. I was finally being smart. The late-night texts she thought I didn't see, the new gym membership at a place across town, the way John had been avoiding eye contact during our weekly business meetings. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't want to see. "Beth, look at me." She didn't turn around. Beth. When she finally faced me, I saw something in her expression that made my stomach drop. Guilt. And underneath that, something even worse. Relief. Like she was glad we were finally having this conversation. I think, she said slowly, we need to consider that maybe we want different things now. Different things. Such a clean, simple way to describe the end of 16 years. What kind of different things? I want a husband who fights for what he deserves, who doesn't let his mother control his business decisions, who can provide the kind of life I thought I was going to have. And if I can't be that person? Beth looked me straight in the eye, and for the first time in months, she was completely honest. Then maybe we need to figure out what comes next. I sat there in my kitchen, surrounded by the life I thought I'd built, and realized I'd been living in a house of cards. The foundation had been crumbling for months, maybe years, and I'd been too focused on keeping the lights on to notice the walls falling down around me. I need some air, I said, standing up. Eddie. But I was already walking toward the door. I needed space to think, to process what had just happened. Because something told me this conversation was just the beginning of a much bigger storm. I drove around for 2 hours that night, past the houses we'd wired, the businesses we'd helped build, the life I thought I understood. When I finally came home, Beth was already in bed, pretending to be asleep. I sat in my home office, staring at the family photos on my desk, and wondered when everything had started going wrong. The next morning, Beth acted like nothing had happened. She made coffee, kissed me goodbye, told me to have a good day at work. But something fundamental had changed between us, and we both knew it. I spent the day watching John, looking for signs of whatever conspiracy Beth had hinted at. My brother seemed normal, cracking jokes, complaining about difficult customers, planning our next big project. But every now and then, I caught him looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It was like seeing a familiar room in different lighting and realizing the furniture had been rearranged while you weren't paying attention. That evening, I decided to test a theory. I told Beth I had to work late, then parked down the street from our house and waited. At 7:30, John's truck pulled into my driveway. He was inside for 45 minutes. When I finally went home, Beth was in the shower and John was gone. She came downstairs in her robe, hair wet, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in weeks. "How was work?" she asked. "Fine. Yours?" "Oh, you know. Same old thing." I nodded and went upstairs to change, my mind racing. Whatever was happening between Beth and John, it wasn't just about business advice. The question was, how long had it been going on, and what exactly did they think they were going to accomplish? I was about to find out that some questions are better left unasked. The next few weeks passed in a haze of forced normalcy. Beth and I went through the motions of married life, family dinners, school events for the girls, weekend errands. But underneath the surface, we were both waiting for something to break. I started paying attention to things I'd been ignoring. Beth's phone habits, her schedule, the way she talked about the future. Or rather, the way she'd stopped talking about the future. No more discussions about vacation plans or home improvements or the girls' college funds. It was like she'd mentally moved out already and was just waiting for her lease to expire. John was harder to read. At work, he seemed normal, but I caught him having hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. He'd started handling more of the business finances, claiming he wanted to take some pressure off me. At the time, I'd been grateful. Now I wondered what else he was taking off my hands. The breaking point came on a Friday in November. I'd been planning to surprise Beth by coming home early. Maybe we could talk, figure out what was wrong, fix whatever had broken between us. Instead, I got the surprise of my life. There was a moving truck in my driveway. I sat in my car for a full minute, trying to process what I was seeing. 2 guys in blue uniforms were loading furniture from my house into the back of the truck. My furniture, my life, boxed up and labeled like inventory. Beth was standing in the front yard, directing traffic with the casual efficiency of someone who'd been planning this moment for weeks. She was wearing jeans and a sweater I'd never seen before, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, looking younger and more energetic than she had in months. When she saw me, her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, guilt, then that same cold determination I'd seen in the kitchen. "Eddie, you're early." I got out of the car slowly, my legs feeling unsteady. "What's going on, Beth?" "I was hoping to have this conversation after the girls got home from school. But since you're here..." She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. "These are for you. Divorce papers." I didn't need to open the envelope to know what was inside. "How long have you been planning this? Does it matter?" "It matters to me." Beth sighed, like I was being unreasonably difficult. "A few months. I tried to make it work, Eddie. I really did. But we both know this hasn't been a real marriage for a long time." "Where are you going?" "I found a place. The girls and I will be fine." The girls. My daughters, who I hadn't seen since breakfast, who had no idea their world was about to explode. "You can't just take them, Beth. They're my daughters too." "Of course they are. We'll work out a custody arrangement." "I'm not trying to keep them from you." She was so calm, so reasonable, like she was discussing the weather instead of dismantling our entire life together. "Where's this place you found?" Something flickered in her eyes. "It's temporary. Just until we figure out the permanent arrangements." "Where, Beth?" "The Riverside Towers." "Downtown." Riverside Towers was expensive. Really expensive. The kind of place that required a substantial security deposit and proof of significant income. Beth hadn't worked outside the house in 10 years. "How exactly are you paying for a place at Riverside Towers?" "I have help." "What kind of help?" Beth looked toward the moving truck, where the guys were loading our dining room table. "Mark Allen is helping me with the transition." Mark Allen. I knew that name, but it took me a moment to place it. Real estate developer, owned half the new construction in the city, drove a Mercedes and wore suits that probably cost more than most people made in a month. I'd met him at a few business functions, found him smooth and charming in a way that immediately made me distrust him. "Mark Allen is helping you move?" "He's been very kind during this difficult time." Difficult time. Like our marriage was a natural disaster instead of something she'd actively chosen to destroy. "How long have you known Mark Allen?" "Eddie, I don't think..." "How long, Beth?" She straightened her shoulders, preparing for a fight. "We met at Karen's birthday party in August. He's been a good friend." August, 3 months ago, right around the time Beth had started acting strange, started talking about what she deserved, started having mysterious conversations with my brother. A good friend. Yes. Good enough to pay for your new apartment? He's helping me get back on my feet. And what does he expect in return? Beth's face flushed. It's not like that. But we both knew it was exactly like that. Mark Allen wasn't known for his charity work, and he definitely wasn't the type to help a married woman leave her husband out of the goodness of his heart. Does John know about Mark? John thinks this is for the best. He's worried about you, Eddie. We all are. John thinks this is for the best. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My wife was leaving me for another man, and my brother thought it was a good idea. Worried about what? You've been different lately. Distant. Angry. The girls have noticed. The girls. She was using our daughters to justify her affair, making me the villain in a story she'd written without my input. Where are Becca and Bree now? They're safe. They're with John and Lisa. John and Lisa. My brother and his wife, who apparently knew about Beth's plans before I did. The conspiracy was bigger than I'd imagined, and I was the only one who hadn't been invited to the meeting. When were you planning to tell me about this? I left a note on your desk. I was hoping you'd find it after we were gone. A note. 16 years of marriage, 2 children, a shared life, and she was going to end it with a note. I want to see the girls. Of course. Maybe tomorrow, when everyone's had time to process. I want to see them now. Eddie, you're upset. This isn't the time. They're my daughters, Beth. You don't get to decide when I see them. For the first time since I'd arrived, Beth looked uncertain. Maybe we should call John. He could help us figure out. No. The word came out harder than I'd intended. No more John. No more Mark Allen. No more decisions about my life made without me. I'm going to see my daughters. I started walking toward my car, but Beth stepped in front of me. Eddie, please. Let's be adults about this. Adults. Like the adult conversation she'd had with Mark Allen before deciding to leave me. Like the adult decision she'd made to involve my brother in her exit strategy. Get out of my way, Beth. I can't let you drive like this. You're too angry. She was right. I was angry. Angrier than I'd ever been in my life. But I was also thinking clearly for the first time in months. All the pieces were finally fitting together. The mysterious phone calls, the new clothes, the way John had been handling more of the business finances. They'd been planning this for months, maybe longer, and I'd been too trusting to see it coming. I'm going to see my daughters, I said again, and then you and I are going to have a real conversation about what happens next. Beth stepped aside, but she pulled out her phone. I'm calling John. You do that. I drove to John's house with my hand shaking on the steering wheel. My brother lived in a subdivision about 10 minutes away, in a house that was bigger than mine despite the fact that we were supposed to be equal partners in the business. I'd never thought much about that discrepancy before. Now I was starting to wonder what else I'd missed. Lisa answered the door, looking guilty and nervous. Eddie, hi. We weren't expecting. Where are my daughters? They're upstairs. But maybe we should wait for John to get home. Where is he? He had to run an errand. An errand. Probably helping Beth move the rest of my life into storage. Lisa, I want to see Becca and Bree. Now. She hesitated, then stepped aside. They're in the guest room. Eddie, they're pretty upset about all this. I found my daughter sitting on the bed looking lost and confused. Becca, 15 and usually full of attitude, looked like she'd been crying. Bree, 13 and my little shadow, ran to me as soon as I walked in the room. Dad! What's happening? Mom said we had to come here, but she wouldn't tell us why. I hugged them both, trying to figure out what to say. How do you explain to your children that their mother has been planning to destroy their family for months? How do you tell them that the adults they trust have been lying to everyone, including themselves? There are some changes happening at home, I said carefully. Your mom and I are having some problems. Are you getting divorced? Becca asked, her voice flat. We're going to try to work things out. That's not what Mom said. I looked at my older daughter, seeing too much adult understanding in her eyes. What did Mom say? She said you guys want different things now. And that sometimes people grow apart. People grow apart. Such a clean, simple explanation for such a complicated betrayal. What do you girls want? I asked. We want things to go back to normal, Bree said, still clinging to me. We want you and Mom to stop acting weird, Becca added. Normal? I wasn't sure any of us remembered what that looked like anymore. We talked for another hour until John came home and found us in the guest room. My brother looked tired and guilty, like a man who'd been making decisions he wasn't proud of. Eddie? Beth called. She said you were upset. Upset. I stood up, kissing both girls on the forehead. I'll talk to you later, okay? I love you both. John followed me downstairs, and we stood in his living room like strangers trying to figure out what to say to each other. You want to explain to me what's going on? I asked. Beth's been unhappy for a long time, Eddie. She needed support. Support from Mark Allen? John's face flushed. It's not what you think. What I think is that my wife has been having an affair, and my brother has been helping her plan her exit strategy. Am I wrong? John was quiet for a long moment. She deserves to be happy. And I don't? You've been checked out for months, working all the time, ignoring what was happening at home. Beth tried to talk to you. When? When did she try to talk to me? She said a lot of things, John. Most of them were lies. My brother looked uncomfortable, like he was starting to realize he'd been played as much as I had. Maybe you two can work it out. Get some counseling or something. Kinda hard to work things out when she's already moved in with another man. John's eyes widened. She moved in with Mark. You didn't know. She said she was getting her own place, to think things through. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. John had been so busy playing the supportive brother-in-law that he'd missed the fact that Beth was using him as much as she was using me. She's at Riverside Towers, John. Mark Allen's paying for it. You think he's doing that out of the goodness of his heart? John sat down heavily on his couch. I thought I was helping. You were helping, just not me. I left him sitting there, trying to process the fact that he'd been manipulated as thoroughly as I had. The difference was, John had chosen to believe Beth's version of events instead of talking to me directly. That betrayal was going to take a lot longer to forgive. I drove home to find the moving truck gone and my house half empty. Beth had taken the good furniture, most of the kitchen stuff, and all the family photos. She'd left me the basics: a couch, my desk, the television, enough dishes for one person. On my desk, I found the note she'd mentioned. 2 pages of careful explanations about growing apart and wanting different things and hoping we could be mature about the transition. She'd signed it, "With love, Beth," like she was ending a letter to a distant relative instead of a marriage. I sat in my empty house, surrounded by the echoes of a life that had been dismantled while I wasn't paying attention, and realized that my real problems were just beginning. The next few weeks were like living in a house with faulty wiring. Everything looked normal on the surface, but underneath, dangerous currents were flowing in directions I couldn't predict. Beth's lawyer called on Monday. Apparently, she wanted to discuss a fair division of assets, which in divorce speak meant she wanted half of everything I'd worked for, including my share of Parish Electric. The business my father had started, that my mother had helped build, that I'd poured 15 years of my life into, Beth wanted to walk away with half of it as compensation for 16 years of marriage to a man she'd decided wasn't worth her time. I hired my own lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in complex divorces. She took one look at Beth's demands and laughed. "Your wife has expensive taste," Patricia said. "Half the business, the house, primary custody of the children, and alimony. She's basically asking you to pay her for the privilege of being divorced." Can she get it? Depends on a lot of factors. How involved was she in the business? Did she contribute to its growth? Can we prove she's been planning this for a while? I told Patricia about Mark Allen, about the apartment at Riverside Towers, about the months of strange behavior leading up to the moving truck in my driveway. "That helps," she said. "If we can show she was having an affair while making plans to leave, it affects the alimony calculation, but we need proof. Proof." I was going to have to become a detective in my own life, gathering evidence of my wife's betrayal like I was building a case against a stranger. Meanwhile, things at Parish Electric were getting complicated. John was acting guilty and defensive, snapping at employees and avoiding the weekly business meetings we'd held for 15 years. My mother, who'd been watching the family drama unfold with her usual sharp-eyed silence, finally cornered me in my office on a Thursday afternoon. "You want to tell me what's going on with you and your brother?" Ruth Parrish was 72 years old and about as subtle as a lightning strike. She'd been running businesses since before I was born, and she could spot trouble from 3 counties away. "Beth left me, Mom. John knew about it before I did." I figured that much out myself. What I want to know is why John's been asking questions about my will. That stopped me cold. What kind of questions? The kind that make me think he's planning for my funeral before I'm dead. Ruth settled into the chair across from my desk, fixing me with the stare that had intimidated contractors and city officials for decades. Your brother seems to think I'm getting too old to make good decisions about the company. He's been suggesting maybe it's time to restructure things, give you boys more control. And what did you tell him? I told him I'll restructure things when I'm good and ready, and not a minute before. Ruth owned 60% of Parish Electric. John and I each owned 20%, a split that had worked fine for 15 years. If John was suddenly interested in changing that arrangement, it meant he was planning something bigger than just supporting Beth's divorce. Mom, has John talked to you about buying out my share? Not directly, but he's been asking a lot of questions about what would happen if one of the partners wanted to leave the business. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't like. John hadn't just been helping Beth plan her exit, he'd been planning his own takeover of the family business. With me out of the picture and Ruth convinced to step back, John would effectively control Parish Electric. What did you tell him? I told him that any major changes would require unanimous agreement from all three partners, including you. Ruth stood up, smoothing down her skirt. Eddie, your brother's always been ambitious. But lately he's been acting like a man who thinks he's smarter than everyone else in the room. That's a dangerous way to think. After she left, I sat in my office trying to figure out how deep the conspiracy went. Beth wanted half of everything in the divorce. John wanted control of the business. Mark Allen wanted, what exactly? Beth. The satisfaction of stealing another man's wife? Or was there something else I was missing? I decided it was time to do some investigating of my own. That weekend, while the girls were staying with John and Lisa, I drove to Riverside Towers. It was a sleek, modern building downtown, the kind of place that charged $3,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. I parked across the street and waited. At 2 o'clock, Beth came out of the building wearing a dress I'd never seen before and carrying shopping bags from stores I couldn't afford. She got into a silver Mercedes that I recognized as Mark Allen's car. I followed them to an expensive restaurant in the Arts District, the kind of place that required reservations and served portions that looked like abstract art. Through the window, I watched my wife laugh at Mark's jokes, touch his hand across the table, act like a woman who'd never been married to anyone else. They looked comfortable together, familiar, like they'd been doing this for months. After lunch, they went back to Mark's penthouse in another expensive building across town. I waited in the parking garage, feeling like a stalker in my own life, until they emerged 3 hours later looking disheveled and satisfied. That evening, I called Patricia Chen and told her what I'd seen. Good, she said. That's exactly the kind of evidence we need. But Eddie, I have to ask, are you prepared for how ugly this is going to get? What do you mean? Your wife is going to fight back. She's going to make you look like the bad guy, claim you were neglectful or controlling or whatever story she needs to tell to justify her actions. And if your brother is involved in this, he's going to have to choose sides. It might get messy at the business. Messy. That was one way to describe having your entire life torn apart by the people you trusted most. Patricia, I need to ask you something. If Beth gets half the business in the divorce, what happens to my partnership with John? That depends on how the partnership agreement is structured. She could become a silent partner, or she could force a sale of your share. Either way, it would change the dynamic significantly. And if John tries to force me out, then you'd better hope your mother is as sharp as she sounds. That night, I sat in my empty house, surrounded by the furniture Beth hadn't wanted, and tried to figure out my next move. I was fighting a war on multiple fronts. The divorce, the business, the custody battle that was inevitably coming. My wife had been planning her escape for months. My brother was positioning himself to take over the company, and I was scrambling to catch up. But I'd been an electrical contractor for 20 years. I knew how to trace problems back to their source, how to find the break in the circuit that was causing the whole system to fail, and I was starting to get some ideas about how to fix it. The first thing I needed was information. Real information, not the carefully edited version of events that Beth and John had been feeding me. I needed to know exactly how long the affair had been going on, what kind of promises Mark had made to Beth, and what John really thought he was going to accomplish. The second thing I needed was leverage. Beth and John thought they held all the cards because they'd been planning this longer than I had. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated how much I was willing to fight for what was mine. My daughters, my business, my life. They'd taken it all apart while I wasn't looking, but I was looking now. And I was starting to get angry. Really angry. The kind of angry that makes a man do things he never thought he was capable of. The kind of angry that turns a mild-mannered electrical contractor into someone his enemies should have thought twice about crossing. Beth wanted a war. John wanted to play games with the family business. Mark Allen thought he could waltz in and take over my life. Fine. But they were about to learn that I hadn't spent 20 years working with high-voltage electricity without learning a few things about power and how to use it. The first shot across the bow came from an unexpected direction. I was having coffee with my mother on a Saturday morning discussing the Morrison Mall project when she casually mentioned that John had scheduled a meeting with the company's accountant for the following Tuesday. "What kind of meeting?" I asked. "Financial review." He said he wanted to make sure we were maximizing our tax advantages. Ruth's tone was carefully neutral, but I could see the suspicion in her eyes. John had never shown much interest in tax advantages before. "Did he invite you to this meeting?" "He said it would be boring for me. Suggested I might want to skip it." John was making his move. Whatever he was planning, he needed to control the financial narrative before I figured out what was really going on. "Mom, I think we should both be at that meeting." I was thinking the same thing. Tuesday morning, John looked surprised to see Ruth and me walk into the accountant's office together. He'd clearly been expecting to handle this alone. "Mom, you didn't need to come to this." "It's just routine stuff." "Nothing routine about my company," Ruth said, settling into her chair with the air of someone who wasn't going anywhere. Our accountant, Dave Morrison, looked nervous. He'd been handling Parish Electric's books for 10 years, and he wasn't used to family drama in his conference room. "So," John said, trying to regain control of the meeting, "Dave and I were discussing some restructuring options that might benefit everyone." "What kind of restructuring?" I asked. Dave opened a folder and pulled out several documents. "Well, given the current family situation, John thought it might be wise to consider what would happen if one of the partners needed to liquidate their share quickly." Liquidate their share. Divorce speak for, "How much money can we get for Eddie's piece of the business?" "And what did you conclude?" Ruth asked. "The business is worth approximately $2.8 million. If Eddie needed to sell his 20% share, it would be worth about $560,000. $560,000. Not bad for 20 years of work, except that I wasn't planning to sell." "Of course," Dave continued. "That assumes we could find a buyer willing to purchase a minority stake in a family business. It might be difficult to find someone interested in a 20% share with no real control." John leaned forward. "That's where the restructuring comes in. If Mom were willing to sell some of her shares to me, I could buy out Eddie's stake directly. Keep it in the family." There it was, John's master plan. Buy out my share of the business, probably at a discount, then use that money to help Beth in the divorce settlement. He'd end up controlling 40% of the company, just 20% less than Ruth, and in a perfect position to take over when she eventually retired. "And why would I want to sell my shares to you?" Ruth asked. "Well, you're not getting any younger, Mom. This would give you some liquid cash while ensuring the business stays in family hands." Ruth was quiet for a long moment, studying the documents Dave had prepared. Then she looked up at John with an expression I'd seen her use on contractors who tried to overcharge her. "John, exactly when did you and Eddie discuss this plan?" "We haven't had a formal discussion yet, but given his situation with Beth." "His situation with Beth?" Ruth's voice was dangerously calm. You mean the divorce that you helped her plan? John's face went red. I didn't help her plan anything. I just provided emotional support during a difficult time. By encouraging her to leave her husband and take half his business with her. Mom, it's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Ruth stood up, gathering her purse. Dave, thank you for your time. John, we'll discuss this later. Eddie, walk me to my car. Outside in the parking lot, Ruth turned to me with fire in her eyes. Your brother's an idiot. Mom, he's an idiot if he thinks I'm going to help him steal your share of the business to pay for your wife's affair. You don't have to get involved in this. I'm already involved. It's my company, and John just tried to manipulate me into helping him cheat my own son. That makes it personal. Ruth got into her car, then rolled down the window. Eddie, your brother thinks he's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers, but he forgot one thing. I've been playing this game since before he was born. That afternoon, John cornered me in my office. What the hell was that about? What about? Bringing Mom to the meeting. I told you it was just routine financial stuff. Routine financial stuff like buying out my share of the business? John sat down, running his hands through his hair. Eddie, look, I know this is complicated. Complicated? You helped my wife plan to leave me, and now you want to force me out of the family business. What's complicated about that? I'm trying to help everyone here. Beth needs financial security, you need liquid assets for the divorce, and the business needs stability. The business has stability. What it doesn't need is partners who make deals behind each other's backs. John was quiet for a moment. Beth says you're not going to fight the divorce. Beth says a lot of things. Most of them are lies. Eddie, come on. You two haven't been happy for years. Everyone could see it. Everyone except me, apparently. You were working all the time, ignoring what was happening at home. Beth felt neglected. So she decided to find comfort with Mark Allen? John's face went pale. What are you talking about? You didn't know? Beth's been having an affair with Mark Allen for months. He's paying for her apartment, taking her to expensive restaurants, playing house with my wife while I'm at work trying to support my family. That's not... She said they were just friends. I almost felt sorry for him. John had been so busy playing the supportive brother-in-law that he'd missed the fact that Beth was using him to cover for her affair. John, she's been lying to all of us. The question is, what are you going to do about it? My brother stared at me for a long moment, processing the fact that he'd been manipulated as thoroughly as I had. I didn't know, he said finally. I believe you. But that doesn't change what you did. You chose to believe her version of events instead of talking to me directly. I thought I was helping. You were helping. Just not me. John left my office looking like a man who'd just realized he'd been played, but the damage was already done. The trust between us was broken, maybe permanently, and I wasn't sure it could be repaired. That evening I got a call from Patricia Chen. Eddie, we have a problem. Beth's lawyer filed a motion for emergency spousal support. She's claiming financial hardship and requesting $5,000 a month until the divorce is finalized. $5,000 a month for a woman who was living in a luxury apartment paid for by her boyfriend. Can they do that? They can try. But given what we know about her living situation, I think we can fight it. The question is, how public do you want this to get? What do you mean? If we contest the motion, we'll have to present evidence of her affair. That means depositions, financial records, testimony from witnesses. It'll all become part of the public record. Public record. Everyone in town would know that Beth had cheated on me, that my brother had helped her do it, that my marriage had been a lie for months. Patricia, what happens if I don't fight it? You pay $5,000 a month to support your wife's affair with another man, and you set a precedent for the final settlement that could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. Let's fight it. You're sure? This is going to get ugly. It's already ugly. Let's just make sure everyone knows who made it that way. The hearing was scheduled for the following Friday. Beth would have to testify about her financial situation, her living arrangements, and her relationship with Mark Allen. John would probably be called as a witness, since he'd been helping her plan her exit strategy. It was going to be a public humiliation for all of them. And for the first time since I'd found that moving truck in my driveway, I was looking forward to something. Beth wanted to destroy my life and make me pay for the privilege? Fine. But she was about to learn that I wasn't the same man who'd been blindsided by divorce papers and moving trucks. I was done being the victim in this story. It was time to start being the villain, and I was going to be very good at it. The hearing was everything I'd hoped it would be, and more. Beth showed up in a conservative blue dress, playing the role of the abandoned wife seeking fair support from her cruel husband. She looked nervous, which was smart of her, because Patricia Chen was about to destroy her entire narrative. "Mrs. Parrish," Patricia began, "you're requesting $5,000 a month in spousal support, claiming financial hardship. Is that correct?" "Yes, I have 2 children to support, and I haven't worked outside the home in 10 years. "And where are you currently living?" "I'm renting an apartment downtown." "At Riverside Towers?" Beth hesitated. "Yes." "And what's the monthly rent on your apartment at Riverside Towers?" I'm not sure of the exact amount." "You're not sure? You signed the lease, didn't you?" "Well, yes, but—" "Mrs. Parrish, isn't it true that your apartment at Riverside Towers rents for $3,500 a month?" Beth's face went pale. "I believe that's correct." "And isn't it also true that you're not paying that rent yourself?" "I have help with expenses." "What kind of help?" Beth looked at her lawyer, who nodded reluctantly. "A friend is helping me during this transition period." "This friend wouldn't be Mark Allen, would it?" The courtroom went completely silent. Beth stared at Patricia like she'd just been hit by lightning. Yes." "And how long have you known Mr. Allen?" "Since August." "Since August. And when did you first discuss leaving your husband?" "I don't remember exactly." Patricia pulled out a folder. "Mrs. Parrish, I have phone records showing that you called Mr. Allen 47 times in September, with conversations lasting an average of 32 minutes each. Does that refresh your memory about when you started planning to leave your husband?" Beth's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The judge was looking at Beth like she was something unpleasant he'd found on his shoe. "Mrs. Parrish," the judge said, "are you currently in a romantic relationship with Mr. Allen?" "Your Honor, I don't see how that's relevant." "It's relevant because you're asking your husband to pay you $5,000 a month while another man is supporting you in a luxury apartment. Answer the question." Beth looked around the courtroom, probably realizing that her carefully constructed victim narrative was falling apart in real time. "Yes," she said quietly. "And how long has this relationship been going on?" "Since September." "While you were still married to your husband?" "Yes." The judge made some notes, then looked at Beth's lawyer. "Counselor, your client was having an affair while planning to divorce her husband, and she's currently being supported by her boyfriend in an apartment that costs more per month than most people make. On what basis are you requesting spousal support?" Beth's lawyer fumbled through some legal arguments about marital assets and standard of living, but everyone in the courtroom could see it was over. The judge denied the motion for emergency spousal support and ordered Beth to provide a complete financial disclosure, including any support she was receiving from Mark Allen. Outside the courthouse, Beth confronted me in the parking lot. "How could you do that to me? In front of everyone? Do what? Tell the truth? You humiliated me." "I didn't humiliate you, Beth. You humiliated yourself. I just made sure everyone knew about it. The girls are going to hear about this. Do you want them to think their mother is, what, a cheater? A liar? Someone who tried to steal half their father's business to fund her affair?" Beth's face crumpled. I never meant for it to happen this way. How did you mean for it to happen? You were going to leave me, take half of everything I'd worked for, and I was just supposed to smile and write you a check? I thought we could be mature about it. Mature? Like the mature decision to have an affair while planning your divorce? Like the mature way you involved my brother in your schemes? Beth looked around the parking lot, probably hoping Mark Allen would show up to rescue her. But Mark was nowhere to be seen. Funny how rich boyfriends disappeared when their girlfriends started having legal problems. Eddie, please, can't we work something out? For the girls? We are working something out. Through our lawyers, in court, where everyone can see exactly what kind of person you really are. I left her standing in the parking lot and drove home to my empty house, feeling better than I had in months. The hearing had been a public relations disaster for Beth, and word was going to spread quickly through our small business community. Everyone would know that she'd cheated on me, tried to steal my share of the business, and then had the nerve to ask me to pay for her affair. But I wasn't done yet. That evening, I got a call from John. Eddie, we need to talk. About what? About what happened in court today. Beth called me crying. She says you're trying to destroy her. I'm not trying to destroy her, John. I'm just making sure she doesn't destroy me. Look, I know I made some mistakes. I should have talked to you directly instead of listening to her version of events. But this has gone too far. Has it? Because from where I'm sitting, it's just getting started. John was quiet for a moment. What do you want, Eddie? I want my life back. I want my daughters to know the truth about what their mother did. And I want my brother to decide whose side he's really on. I'm on your side. I always have been. No, John. You were on Beth's side when she needed help planning her escape. You were on your own side when you tried to buy out my share of the business, but you weren't on my side when I needed you most. How can I fix this? You can start by telling Mom the truth about your little financial restructuring plan. You can stop taking Beth's phone calls, and you can help me make sure she doesn't get a penny more than she's legally entitled to. And if I do that, then maybe we can rebuild some trust. Maybe we can still be brothers and business partners. But John, if you keep playing both sides, you're going to lose everything. The next morning, John showed up at my office with coffee and donuts, like we were kids again, and he was trying to apologize for breaking my favorite toy. I talked to Mom last night, he said. Told her everything. About Beth, about Mark Allen, about the financial restructuring idea. And what did she say? She said I was an idiot for getting involved in your marriage problems. She also said she's changing her will. That got my attention. Changing it how? She's leaving her 60% share to both of us equally. But there's a condition. If either of us tries to force the other out of the business, the departing partner gets the whole thing. Ruth Parrish, still playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. That's fair, I said. Eddie, I'm sorry. I really am. I thought I was helping everyone, but I just made everything worse. Yeah, you did. How do we fix this? We work together to make sure Beth doesn't destroy what Dad and Mom built. We protect the business, we protect the girls, and we make sure everyone knows exactly what she did. John nodded. What do you need me to do? I need you to testify in the divorce proceedings. Tell the court about Beth's plans, about how long she was planning this, about her relationship with Mark Allen. That's going to hurt her case. That's the point. The final divorce hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, Patricia and I gathered evidence, interviewed witnesses, and built a case that would ensure Beth got exactly what she deserved, nothing more than the minimum required by law. The day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Word had gotten around about the drama, and half the business community showed up to watch the fireworks. Beth arrived with Mark Allen, which was either incredibly stupid or incredibly brave. John was there to testify on my behalf, along with my mother and several employees who could speak to Beth's lack of involvement in the business. The hearing lasted 6 hours. Beth's lawyer tried to argue that she deserved half of everything because she'd been a supportive wife and mother. Patricia countered with evidence of the affair, the planning, the manipulation, and the fact that Beth had contributed nothing to the business beyond spending the money it generated. In the end, the judge awarded Beth a modest settlement, enough to get by, but nowhere near the windfall she'd been expecting. She got limited custody of the girls, no alimony, and no claim to parish electric. The judge also ordered her to pay her own legal fees, which had been mounting up for months. Outside the courthouse, Mark Allen was nowhere to be seen. Apparently, he'd lost interest in Beth once it became clear that she wasn't going to be a wealthy divorcee. Beth stood on the courthouse steps, looking lost and defeated, while photographers from the local newspaper took pictures. Her affair, her schemes, her public humiliation, it was all going to be in the paper the next day. "Eddie," she called as I walked past. I stopped and looked at her. This woman I'd been married to for 16 years, who'd tried to destroy my life for the promise of a richer one. "What, Beth?" "I hope you're happy." I thought about it for a moment. Was I happy? My marriage was over, my family was broken, my relationship with my brother would never be the same, but I still had my daughters, my business, and my self-respect. Beth had none of those things. "Yeah," I said. "I am." I walked away from Beth Parrish, soon to be Beth Morrison again, and got into my truck. My daughters were waiting for me at home, ready to start rebuilding our lives without the woman who'd tried to sell us all for a penthouse apartment and a Mercedes. It had taken 6 months, but I'd finally learned the truth about electricity. It's not about the power you have, it's about knowing how to use it. And I'd used mine to light up every dark corner of Beth's betrayal, to expose every lie she'd told, and to make sure everyone knew exactly what she'd done to our family. The voltage had dropped, the circuit had failed, but I'd rewired the whole system, and it was working perfectly. Glee, 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 glee.